Most people think that facts make them credible, but the reality is that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts by themselves. In this video, I'm going to show you the 5 core stories that you need to build trust, connect emotionally, and stay top of mind, even when your audience isn't ready to take action yet. But maybe the most important thing we're talking about is how you close the loop and tie your stories back to the work that you do. Because let's be honest, you're not doing that podcast to entertain Joe and Jill on their commute. You are doing it because you want people to hire you. So, when done right, your stories become a business asset, just like your frameworks, and they are uniquely yours. AI can't steal them, and they help people relate to you on a level that's completely human. I'm Laura Zovelson, and this is the Gen Expert Show, where we talk about how to turn your frameworks, stories, and opinions into business assets that you can leverage to fill your pipeline and become the go to in your niche. I think this is why storytelling is what we all need to be doing more of in 2026. When you share a story, whether it's yours or your clients, you are doing the one thing that AI can't do, and that's share the details of a lived experience. So here's where I see a disconnect. A lot of the social media and content advice to experts is to give value before you sell. But now, a lot of those tips and tricks that we've all kind of become dependent on sharing, they're available in a nanosecond from ChatGPT. So, the real opportunity here is to bring those tips and tricks to life with stories. And that's going to create a connection which helps people understand and trust you. And that's what's going to spark that inbound inquiry or get you invited to submit the proposal. But if you're like me, storytelling does not come naturally. In fact, it's kind of awkward. And where are you even supposed to start to pull out stories from your experience and from your own life? Well, it turns out we can narrow that down a little bit because there are 5 story types that have been shown to work for marketing purposes. Now, I'm not saying you can't have 100 stories, but if you just stick with these 5, if you work on these, if you write them like stories and you practice saying them, you can find ways to take pieces of them and weave them into wherever you're sharing content. So, in your articles and your podcast interviews, you can work this powerful, memorable tool into your messaging every time you communicate. So, let's get to those story types. Story one is your origin story. This is why I do what I do. It shows how your journey has shapes the work that you do today. So, the one I often tell is about the one of the day of my last interview. So here I was, a serial founder. I've raised VC. I ran a successful agency. I taught entrepreneurship. And I was interviewing for a job where I would be building a startup accelerator. Well, it became clear this guy hadn't even looked at my resume. He made up his mind based on my age and my gender. And when I told him that I was previously the CFO, COO for a SaaS startup, basically his job, he says, "Are you even qualified to do that?" Honestly, I should have walked out, but I didn't. Somehow I finished that conversation, but I vividly remember my drive home. I'm on the Embarcadero in San Francisco, and I stop at a red light, and I looked at the water, and I realized I was never going to go on another interview again. And that's how I knew I was ready to commit to my consulting business for the long haul. So that's an origin story. And your origin story can be used to show your credibility without sounding like you're reading your resume. Story number 2 is your results story. So it's proof of transformation, yours or a client's. Now, this is a lot of times a case study, and I certainly hope you have a few of these, but you might not be used to thinking about them as a storytelling opportunity. So the thing is, these can be used to show your process, not just say, oh, I got this person from here to here, I got this company from here to here. And they educate people about how you work. So, one thing that I think is useful to turn a case study into a story is to start by stating the problem, but then add the emotional color of how it impacted your client, right? And then you can talk about your approach and the result. And then you weave in the emotional piece about how things have changed for your client now. So maybe they're less stressed, or maybe they have more revenue, or maybe their team delivers projects on time, right? Whatever transformation it is that you deliver, what's the emotional impact of that? Because that's what's going to stick with and resonate with people. Now, you could stop right there with a tight origin story and maybe a handful of results or case studies. But if you're willing to put in a little extra effort, we can develop 3 more stories that's going to turn storytelling into a real asset for your business. Story number three is a mistake or vulnerability story, right? You can talk about a failure, you can talk about a lesson you learned, you can talk about an obstacle you overcame, and it can be personal or professional, right? The idea is not to bare our souls or give up a bunch of intimate details. It's just an acknowledgement that you've been where your client is, and also that you didn't just pop out fully formed as an expert, that you actually grew along the way. And again, this just helps highlight your humanity and helps people relate to you as a person. So let me give you an example. I actually did not use storytelling a lot in my business until this year. So in April, a coach challenged me to write a personal story for a webzine online. So I told the story of the fear and decision paralysis I faced when I was offered the chance to teach entrepreneurship after I lost my agency during the Great Recession. It was personal, but it was about a business issue, not a family issue. It was something I felt comfortable sharing. And I've talked about it in front of classes and workshops before, but I had never sort of put it out there publicly. Well, the response blew me away. There were more downloads of my lead magnet from that story than any other media appearance I had. And when I shared it on LinkedIn, it got the most impressions of any LinkedIn post I've ever had. So that's actually when I added stories to my POV framework. So, story number four, I call the rant story. And this is where you say, here's what everybody else gets wrong in the industry, or here's what I don't like about what's currently going on in my niche, right? It shows that you've learned enough over time to be able to see things and have insights that other people don't have. And if you do the rant story right, it helps your prospective clients see things differently. And that's one of the things that they're looking for. So, story number five is your vision story. And this is where you talk about where your niche is going or where you believe it needs to go. It's kind of your opportunity to really break out of the pack by, instead of saying what everybody else is saying, you get out in front and you wave your arms and you say, hey, everybody, this is the direction we all need to be going. Your vision is what creates your tribe and makes people want to be a part of your movement. So I've got one bonus story for you, and these are easy peasy to throw together. And this would be your kind of your everyday metaphor story. So what you're doing is you're tying an everyday moment to a business lesson. And these turn out to be really memorable and for some reason shareable. So for instance, I did an article that compared having a standard product to the frustration I felt standing in line at See's Candy during the holidays. And to my surprise, that was one of my most liked newsletters ever. I think stories aren't just branded content. They're actually a secret weapon. Your origin story helps people understand why you care. Your results story, your case studies, they prove that you can get results. Your mistake story builds trust and shows that you're human. Your rant story shows leadership. And your vision story cements that perspective and insight that decision makers are looking for. And once you create these stories, you repurpose them everywhere: podcasts, keynotes, social posts, whatever. I think stories have their own power. Yeah, they take more time to tell than sort of a just the facts ma'am approach. But I think that when you invite people to spend a little bit more time with you and they get invested in the payoff or the end, you start to occupy a different space in their brain. So, look, if you want more guidance on creating these five stories, just drop me a comment and let me know. If enough people are interested, I will build a custom GPT that gives you writing prompts for each story and helps you tie them back to your services. And I can also do another video about that. Okay, that's it for me today. If you're a subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're new, I really appreciate you watching. I hope you'll join me again soon. Bye.